a couple of ideas around Bai Shi and who was Bai Shi. One of them that you'll often hear, it's one I associate with sort of Shaolin lines actually more, is this idea of 9 years sweeping the floor, which if taken literally could be 9 very boring years. But the implication being that before someone was Bai Shi, allowed to become an inner door member of the tradition, they would have to sweep the floor of the temple for 9 years. During those 9 years, they would be observed to check their character and their dedication and their discipline and all the things you would associate with being a sort of Shaolin temple inductee, really. Pretty sure it wasn't literal, although maybe, who knows. Sometimes the stories you hear from these traditions are pretty crazy. But I would assume during that 9 years that student was also learning the outer door aspects of the art. So that's one way of looking at it. And actually, one of the traditions I'm in still adheres to that to a certain degree, meaning that the absolute, not that I had to sweep a floor. I don't think they ever asked me to sweep a floor once, which I would have been happy to do. No, I don't think they did. But the Bai Shi, the minimum, like it wasn't even mentioned before I'd been within that tradition for 9 years. So it was funny, it was almost to the day, actually, if I come to think about it, the sort of the meeting after that 9 years had passed, that the Bai Shi wasn't even offered to me particularly, I was just given it. So that meant that I was actually watched and observed for 9 years. So the teacher during that time wasn't just assessing my physical capabilities, which is a fucking relief because I'm a clumsy oaf, but also my character and my dedication and my growth over that period of 9 years, my respect, my discipline, you know, all those kind of things. They were getting to know who I was, you know. So that's one tradition, or one sort of set of values you see around the tradition. The other one is called 3 years visiting the teacher, 3 years, no, get this right around, 3 years. Not very good with Chinese sayings, as you could probably tell. But it's basically 3 years visiting the master, 3 years visiting the student. That's right. So 6 years of testing as opposed to 9. During the first 3 years of visiting the teacher, this is the idea that the student was visiting the master to receive teachings. Okay, so this first 3 years, the implication is visiting the master means that the first 3 years were an assessment of the student's ability to receive material from the teacher. How well could they learn? Like, do you have the potential to become an expert or dare I say, a master at these arts? Okay, so that's what visiting the master means, visit the master to receive their teachings. The next 3 years were based upon the master visiting the student, meaning that by going to the student, doesn't literally mean you go to the student's house or something. It means rather looking to the student to assess them as a person. So for the next 3 years, it was character assessment that was taking place. The master is visiting the student. Then after the 6 years, once it would be seen there's a match, you know, we have a person that is able to learn this. They're also, you know, of decent upright character according to the subjective, of course, opinion of the teacher. Plus they got 6 years training. Then that person could be offered a Bai Shi and inducted into that tradition. Okay, so once that person is inducted into the tradition, and this is purely only discussing the externals of the Bai Shi ceremony, there are internals aspect to it as well within some traditions, but these are just externals. So after that 6 years or 9 years, as a bare minimum, then the teacher would know, or the master would know, the holder of the lineage would know, this is someone I'm happy to take as a disciple, as a 2D, and then I will teach them the inner door aspects of the art. I would say that the way I use the terminology is not quite the same as maybe how some others do. It's my own personal take in it, but I always think if you haven't been Bai Shi'd, then you don't really have a teacher, you have an instructor. So my relationship with my students is as an instructor. I instruct them. I am here to instruct you in how to do these things, purely on the method. If, however, someone had been Bai Shi'd, then my own terminology, not traditional, but just how I kind of see it, then the person who has Bai Shi'd you becomes your teacher, not your instructor. So the difference to me is outer door is based on physical instruction. This is how you do the techniques, this is how you learn the art. The inner door, a teacher, is now a teacher to every aspect of your life. So therefore they have a right to pass comments on your character and your behavior and your personality and your ethics. So one thing I've noticed, and like I say, teacher is the way I use the words, just so you know, if I use those words, what do I mean? One thing I've noticed as well, and it's caused confusions in schools I've been in, is I've seen that if you get a big bunch of students in a school, or any group of people together anywhere, some people are going to be difficult. It's just the case. So you will get disrespectful people, rude people, difficult people, conniving people, manipulative people, as well as you get decent people. That's the nature of any group. There is a whole spectrum. And I've been in schools, meditation schools, Tai Chi schools, where there's been just really horrible people. And the teacher will, or the person running the school, I should say, will make no effort to correct anybody's behavior. Instead, what they'll often do is just bide their time and then throw that person out of the school. And I remember being younger thinking, oh, I wonder why the person in charge, why the teacher didn't just tell them that they're doing something right. Why didn't they tell them how to behave? And then as I came to spend longer inside traditions, I realized that actually they don't act that way with people that have been Bai Shi'd. So once somebody is Bai Shi'd, actually if they do something wrong or they do something manipulative or they do something rude, the teacher will tell them. Okay, and this is very much what I've said is the traditional Chinese way of teaching. So they will tell them, and then they will give the Bai Shi'd students a chance to adjust their behavior, and the non-Bai Shi'd students they just remove from the school. And I kind of get it. I didn't used to, but now I do. Because in the traditional culture, the idea is the students coming into that school should have been trying to essentially prove themselves, ultimately, in order to get to the stage where they could be Bai Shi'd and given inner door teachings. And only once they prove themselves to even be worthy of Bai Shi does this teacher, the traditional teacher, even then think, well, now I have a right to get involved in who they are as a person. Pre-Bai Shi, they're just observing them. Yeah, so there's all these different sort of balances, power balances going on, I guess. And I guess that some people, like when I was younger, wouldn't understand that, and they would think, well, there should be a different level of, telling people how to be or something. But actually, I've come to agree with the traditional way, because if somebody cannot even act with manners and ethics and decency for a short number of years, like 6 to 9, then they're probably not the right person to receive the more complex aspects of these arts anyway. So therefore, they're better off going away from the school and either working on their character or developing themselves in life, rather than coming back for these esoteric teachings. So, I'm sure some will disagree, and there's pros and cons to that, but what I'm kind of getting at is I understand the traditional way. I understand it. So then you have, complications. I'm aware that I said I'd talk about the internal aspects of Bai Shi, and I will do, but there's some complications around Bai Shi as well, one of which is the translation of the term 2D, like the inner door student, because one of them you see is disciple. Now, I don't like the term disciple. I've had teachers that use that term, Chinese teachers who, when they speak English, will use the term disciple. And I'm okay with them using it because they're translating it according to the conventional way that the term is translated. But I do think it's problematic when Westerners use the term, because disciple, whether we like it or not, already has a religious implication to it, right? I mean, most people in the West, certainly in Christian countries like the ones I grew up in, although England's a bit of a, godless hellhole, but it still has kind of traditional, historical or background to it. When we say disciple, most people think of Christ. Now, when we start using the term disciple, like these are my disciples, I already think that whether it's stated or not, there's an uncomfortable ability to sort of subconsciously cause a projection onto the teacher, or a projection for the teachers down to the disciples, because they're almost comparing themselves to some kind of divine being, or certainly raising themselves onto a pedestal much higher than the students in an unhealthy way. So I don't really like that term. For me, the difference between Bai Shi and non-Bai Shi within a sort of Western context would be the difference between a senior and a non-senior student, which would be the way that I would personally rather translate it, so that it was more relevant to a sort of Western context, or perhaps inner and outer door students, because that simply refers to the kind of teaching that somebody is receiving rather than anything else. In an external version of a Bai Shi, inner door means invited into the teacher's house to study. Outer door means essentially you're not invited into the teacher's house, you're taught in a public place or something. But of course that's metaphorical for the level of teachings you're receiving. It can also implicate the closeness of the relationship, because in ancient times, if you're invited into someone's house, which is quite a vulnerable place, you know where they live, you know where they rest, you know where their family is, you're accepted as a family member. Whereas if you don't trust someone, you keep them out of your house, right? So even the relationship should change between a student that is Bai Shi and not Bai Shi, so that a Bai Shi student has more of a family kind of relationship for you. So there's all those kind of complications and implications around Bai Shi as well. The whole ceremony of it, tapping the head to the floor and offering the master tea and all that, it works in an Asian culture, especially within traditions that are quite old, or especially with masters that are quite traditional in their behavior, but again doesn't really translate across to the West. And with regards to external versions of Bai Shi, which I'll define in a minute, it's an empty ceremony, especially when overlaid into a sort of Eastern context, because I understand the implication of the Bai Shi within a sort of a culture that has almost a, what do you call it, Confucianist, that's the word I'm looking for, a Confucianist quality to it that is based upon kind of loyalty, almost like, loyalty, family loyalty, or filial piety is the term. So when someone is accepted and they've touched their head to the floor and accepted you as their better, then they instantly should do, in traditional Chinese culture, accept you as like a father. So the father-son, father-daughter, mother-son, mother-daughter relationship is established. So within Eastern context, that makes sense. But within the Western context, it rarely works, because we don't have that Confucianist kind of society. I would say that actually a lot of Western society is based on a very individualist kind of mindset, where there's less, I definitely think there's less importance placed upon this kind of traditional conservative values, I guess, would be the closest we have, of respect up the family line and respect to elders. So therefore the meaning of the Bai Shi gets missed a little bit. So let me explain the difference between the two. Bai Shi, if you are Asian, traditional Asian, and a modern Asian, probably very different, but traditional Asian, within a society that's been very influenced by Confucianism, would suggest to you that once you've touched your head to the floor and you've been accepted as an inner door student, you now become like a son or daughter to that teacher, and therefore that teacher now has a responsibility to bring you up and nurture you as if you were one of their children. And in return, you give loyalty to them as if you were respecting your father or your mother, so that they can then move from an instructor to a teacher to nurture you and teach you all of the skills of that line. So in traditional Asia, being careful with my words because I knew that modern Asia is much like the West. So, but in traditional Asia, once I've seen traditional Asians, traditionally minded Asians, receive the Bai Shi, then they will become very, very loyal to that teacher that they already have a lengthy relationship with, and now they will allow that teacher to mold them in that direction, and they have much respect for what that father or mother figure says to them. That's useful because it means that the teacher has then a say not only in the student's development but also in how they pass on the art as well. Now in the West, that concept gets lost. So what happens often when a Westerner Bai Shis is I don't think they see it as I'm now stepping through the door where I can be taught. What they mistake it as is often, from what I've seen, I now have it's like they mistake it not for a new father and son relationship, or switch the genders around as you see fit, you know what I mean, parental relationship. They don't see it as that, which is the start of your journey. They see it as, you've handed me the highest certification possible, so now I have freedom to do whatever I want. Can you see the difference? This is what the Westerners see it as. It reminds me very much, it's a much more simplistic thing, but of the black belt in Japanese arts. So I came up through arts like karate and kendo and arts like this. And in karate, especially when I was younger, you went through the colored belts within a traditional art like Shotokan until you achieved a black belt. And the first dan, the black belt, indicated that, in Chinese terms, jumping traditions, that you had completed the Qigong, the foundation work, which is why most karate up until black belt is very basic shapes. It's teaching you to use your hips and use your legs for a number of years because it's foundational, not very advanced stuff, foundations. Then once you'd reach your black belt, that says you have finished your foundation work, so now you can begin your journey into karate. This is why if you look at a lot of the kata, the forms that are developed pre-black belt, they were added later and simplified versions of the complex forms which begin at first dan, which are more akin to what would have been the proper forms from that style. So you can see what I mean. Getting to black belt means you finish your basics, now at black belt you're ready to study. But most Westerners don't understand that. So what happens, they get their black belt and they think completed. They're not completed foundations, completed arts. So we mistakenly think a black belt means a master, something that's not helped by, you know, movies and what have you. I even remember an old ZX Spectrum, if you're old enough to know what the fuck a ZX Spectrum is, game I had, which was a video game that loaded up on cassettes. You used to have to rewind the cassette with a pencil to get the tape to go in, and then you plug it in, it would make some weird noises for a while, and then you could play a really shit video game. Some of you are too young, you'll have no idea what the fuck I'm talking. Why do you have to rewind your video game with a pencil? But one of those games was called Black Belt, for example, and it was very popular, and we all played this game called Black Belt. And of course the implication was they were black belts, so they were masters. So even within our culture, our pop culture, we didn't even understand, sorry, I probably lost loads of you there, didn't even understand what a black belt was. So in the way that we've switched black belt is the start of your training to black belt is completion of your training, the same has happened with Bai Shi. So I will see Westerners become Bai Shi and think, oh, this is recognition from the teacher or the lineage holder that I am a master level practitioner, so I can do whatever I want. Which is why you get the common story of someone being Bai Shi in Asia, a Westerner going to Asia to be Bai Shi, and then never seeing their teacher ever again. When in actual fact, once you've been Bai Shi, you should practically live near that teacher. It should be a constant interaction that you have with them after this, because they've just Bai Shi'd you, meaning I now accept you as a student, as opposed to prior to you Bai Shi'ing, I didn't really accept you as a close student, I accepted you as an out-of-door student. So if you've only just been accepted as a student, that's when your real training begins. That's what the Bai Shi means. So it's not the end of anything. So sometimes when you see teachers in the West using Bai Shi, I've been Bai Shi'd, I have this lineage, that lineage, they throw them around like certifications, because Westerners, they know that most other Westerners don't know that the Bai Shis they're throwing around mean I have just been accepted as an actual student within this tradition. What it means is that someone saying they are Bai Shi shouldn't really carry much weight unless they were Bai Shi many years ago. You know, like, the funny thing is, like, I was recently Bai Shi about, well, less than a year ago. I was recently Bai Shi within a tradition, not a Tai Chi tradition, not a martial tradition, a spiritual tradition. So that means to me, even though I've been in that tradition for many years, many years, I've been in that tradition for many years, but only just been Bai Shi less than a year ago. I don't announce that. Well, I guess I did just announce that Bai Shi on here. Well, not what I mean. I don't throw it around like it's a qualification or something, because to me what it means is only less than a year ago, they have just started to teach me the actual inner door mechanics and proper teachings of that tradition. All of the years prior to that, they were teaching me, sure, but it was testing me, getting to know who I was, I guess in a way allowing me to see who they were. So when they did that Bai Shi for me, at no point did I consider that a certification of any start. It's like, oh right, now I have become my journey. And the result of me being Bai Shi accepted into that tradition is that I'm now right. Now I have to up my training. So therefore my life has had to be adjusted, because I need to make more time to study and learn this art that I've been Bai Shi'd into. Now I've been through this process several times, and that's always what I've been seen a Bai Shi as the beginning of the journey. Now, unfortunately, things get distorted and things get lost, and Bai Shis get sold these days as well. I mean, there's several Bai Shis that I, don't really count because I only saw the teacher for a few weeks. I'm going to China, I go to a school, I'd be there 3 or 4 weeks, and they'd hand me a Bai Shi certificate, sometimes with the ceremony, sometimes without the ceremony, and I didn't really understand it. Like, why have I been given this? And sometimes I'd be with other Westerners, and they'd be all like, we've been Bai Shi'd, we're lineage holders or something, and I'd be just like, why? What's the point? The teacher doesn't know who I am. I don't know who the teacher is. They've not watched my behavior. I haven't learned the foundations. Why? It would be like me walking into a new Japanese art and they just hand me a black belt. Like, why? Why would I do that? I've never done Japanese. Well, I've done lots of Japanese art. I've never done Aikijitsu. How about? I've never done that. Trying to use Japanese art, I've never done. Never done Aikijitsu. It would be like me walking into an Aikijitsu class and they just hand me a first hand. It wouldn't make any sense. That's what happens when people go and they get given a Bai Shi when you don't know the person and you've not done any of their foundation work. They don't know your character. They've not taught you. So I don't get it. So sometimes I've been handed those kind of Bai Shis and I just take the piece of paper that comes with it and stuff it in the bottom of a drawer and generally don't ever go back to that school or that teacher because I know that that teacher's not acting with integrity. If they would qualify me that quickly without checking my character, then they're clearly not valuing their system enough anyway. They're not taking it seriously. And then I came to realize that actually those people were Bai Shi'ing me very quickly for a couple of reasons. In the old days, it was because I was white, and they wanted white students. So often the Asian teachers would have, it would be a status symbol to have a Western student. These days, that doesn't really happen quite so much because there's a lot more Westerners going to China. But in the old days, there wasn't so many. So therefore, many teachers didn't have a Western student. So it was a big deal. So as a Western student, I would often get a Bai Shi like that, whether I asked for it or not. Second thing was, they knew I had a school that's not small. Lotus Qigong is pretty huge now, but it was never that small. And once they figured out I had a student base, then of course it was a business thing because they'd Bai Shi me, then really, by all accounts, they get access to all of the people I teach. So there was that, and then also a financial thing as well. So lots of those things were, a combination to ensure that Bai Shis were handed to me very easily. So my ego had to ignore those very easily given Bai Shis because many times I was with other Westerners or something that were given Bai Shi, or I saw similar things happen. People who had names for themselves in the West would go to a teacher and get given a Bai Shi, and I would see them get carried away and suddenly think, the teacher must have recognized something amazing in me that nobody else has. I must be a natural. And I'm thinking, no, it's because you're white and you've got a lot of students. It's a business thing, you know. Oh, I just realized it's getting dark. I hope the picture quality is okay and it holds out. But you're listening anyway, I guess. Not much to see, just me chatting. So there's, that's a bit of the negative of Bai Shis and the positives, So I guess what I'm getting at is if a Bai Shi is done properly, then it should ensure a certain standard of instruction has been maintained. Because normally what happens is the person that Bai Shi'd you has been Bai Shi'd themselves, and then da-da-da-da. And it means that the person can pass on that line. It's also why traditionally teachers would not normally Bai Shi you if you've been Bai Shi'd a lot of other times. If you get what I mean. Like, I've already got 6 Bai Shis, 6 masters of Bai Shi'd me, then I go to see the 7th master, and then the 7th master gives me a Bai Shi as well. Now, each of those masters, especially the later ones, knows that their art is probably not going to be passed on as purely as it possibly could, because in classical traditional Chinese way of doing things, you could only really have one master. You could only really be Bai Shi'd by one master. Say you take Tai Chi. Say you're a Yang style Tai Chi practitioner and you had a lineage from a Yang style master. You might have had 3 or 4 teachers, but usually you would only be Bai Shi'd by one, because their view was they wanted at least their method to be passed on in as pure a way as they could from one teacher to the other. Now, no method is ever purely pure. It always gets adjusted or changed, of course, because body types are different, people are different, experiences are different. So a pure lineage, it's something like Tai Chi doesn't really exist. But there's degrees of it. So if you'd spent 50 years developing your art and then you Bai Shi somebody, you want to hand that art across in the best way you possibly can, knowing they will preserve it as purely as they possibly can. But if that person's had 8 other Bai Shis, and they've had them for a while, then that person already has 8 other teachers' input into their body, 8 other teachers' input into their system, meaning when I hand them my methods and I teach them, it's going to mix with all of those other 8 to produce some kind of amalgamation of all of the other systems they've learned. Because how can you, say you do Yang style and you do 3 different versions of Yang style, you don't really. You can't do 3 different versions of Yang style. They will become one version of Yang style, which is the version that happens in your body when they all mix. You might know all the forms for the 3 different forms of Yang style, but of course you're doing one Yang style. Here's an example. I'm trained in Chen Manqing and Huang style, Huang Xinshan style Tai Chi, which, okay, obviously they're quite similar because Chen Manqing taught Huang Xinshan. So I have those mechanics built into my body from doing those styles. I also have the Tian Jiao Lin methods because I learned from other teachers. I have an unusual southern version of Yang style Tai Chi that I've studied as well, and then another form as well. It doesn't really matter, but it's like for one time on another video, I'll outline my martial arts background if people are interested in Tai Chi. I know some of the people I teach would like me to make it clearer, so I will do. But say I've got those 4 different systems. Now, the Huang style and the Chen Manqing style work very different in the Tian Jiao Lin style, and very different. Well, I've got also a very sort of Yang Chen Fu line as well. Now, those are very different mechanics. Very, very different mechanics from each other. So, if I were to try to keep those separate, I can't. So when I teach the people I teach Huang style Tai Chi, which is what I start with, it's already modified a little bit by what they're learning from me, because my body already has the methods I learned from the Yang Chen Fu line and the Tian Jiao Lin line and the Southern Yang style line, all built into my body. They're built into the mechanics of what I'm doing. Because all of the arts transform your body, I can only do the art with my body. So in the same way as I can't do pure Huang style Tai Chi, I also couldn't do the Tian Jiao Lin style purely. I just couldn't, because it would be modified, or it has been affected by my Huang style Tai Chi. So therefore, whatever form I do is Yang style is governed by all of these different systems. People might try to pretend that you can avoid that, but you can't. You definitely can't. I mean, realistically, I also do Bagua, Cheng style Bagua. So Cheng style Bagua, spelt Cheng style if you're wondering about that, Cheng style Bagua has also changed my body as well. I've also got Hebei Jingyi. So if all those things are built into my body, I'm sure there is an influence from my Bagua into my Tai Chi. I'm sure there's an influence from my Tai Chi into my Bagua. So therefore, I can't really claim that any of them are pure. So if you think about, if an aging master is deciding to hand on to their lineage, what they're hoping for is someone that passes all of their criteria and then doesn't have all of those other systems built into their body. So therefore what they want is someone who's clean, if you want, that they can Bai Shi. And if you already have all the other Bai Shis, you should understand or find out from your teacher what they expect, because often that teacher, once they Bai Shi'd you, will expect you to work with them. This is the start of your training with them. Remember, you've been Bai Shi'd, you've been accepted as a student. So now what they're going to do is they're going to try to train all of the other mechanics of the other styles out of you, to try to purify or clean your mechanics so you more purely carry that system through. So I don't know if I explained that very well, but that's the expectation. So it's like a discussion or something that I always wanted to find out with someone when I'm going to be accepted by being Bai Shi'd, accepted into a tradition. To what degree do they wish to eradicate my prior learning to pass on this Bai Shi to me, to pass on their tradition? Because otherwise, what vested interests would they have? Like, think about it. What other than money or business, what vested interest would they have in passing a Bai Shi onto you, in passing a lineage onto you, if you're not going to preserve it in the purest way possible? So I've been aware of people that have taken Bai Shis just to get hold of a form that they're then going to mix other mechanics into to create some new hybrid. Now, in my view, the teacher that gave them the Bai Shi doesn't know that's going to happen, because they're probably working on a more traditional Asian mindset where the assumption is that student is now been accepted by me, so therefore they respect me, so they're going to eradicate all of their previous mechanics so they can learn this one because they must be the flag bearer for my tradition. Or alternatively, that Chinese teacher is just after money and status, in which case the Bai Shi is pointless. So there's those kind of complications, right? So that's, you know, a part of the Bai Shi complications, or the Bai Shi ethics, the Bai Shi morality. You know, like they're all things that you need to consider if there's something you're going to take seriously. Because remember, a Bai Shi is not just like a teaching certification. It's something different. It's just that it's not often understood in the West, which is why I'm making this video, because I want people to understand it. So those are external Bai Shis I've spoken about so far, which are more like what you will get in Tai Chi traditions, Bagua tradition, martial arts traditions, essentially, and some Qigong traditions. External Bai Shi things. And the external Bai Shi is very much, what I mean by external is it's about a teaching that is passed on. So I've accepted you as an inner door student. You are now my disciple, if you want to use the translation I don't like. So therefore, I'm now going to teach you. That's an external Bai Shi. Now the difference is we have an internal Bai Shi. Now an internal Bai Shi, which is my way of classifying it. I don't know if they traditionally divided them up like so, but you know, this is how I'm going to word it. An internal Bai Shi is not present in Tai Chi, which is odd because I know Tai Chi is an internal art, but wait till you see how I define internal Bai Shi. An internal Bai Shi is different. An internal Bai Shi exists within a more spiritual tradition. Now, I know some people would like to pretend that Tai Chi is equivalent to the sort of deepest mystical of arts, but it's not. It is a form of meditative work, and it has a very deep transformative capabilities on a person's body and mind. So Tai Chi is incredibly deep. Bagua is incredibly deep. So, but it misses one component. And that component exists in something like Neidan, alchemy, or meditation from the Chan traditions, or meditation from a yogic tradition. Like, it doesn't matter. Meditation should have this. And then also Gong will have this as well. Like, spiritual traditions will include a different kind of Bai Shi. But these Bai Shis are different, because the internal Bai Shi, as odd as I'm trying to figure out how to word it, might sound weird to some people. You'd have to go through the Bai Shi within these traditions to fully understand it. But it includes something that is passed, for want of a better word, psychically, but it's actually from a form of energetic magnetism, if you want, but we'll say psychically for now. Yes, that'll do. Psychically passed from the teacher to the student, essentially. So there's a kind of energetic empowerment that is passed on that's not present in Tai Chi. Not present in martial art lineages. I know some people would like to say they are, but I've been around martial arts my whole life. I've been involved in Tai Chi for many, many years. I've been at many Bai Shi ceremonies. It's not a part of martial arts. It's not how they work. Sometimes people would try to conflate things, but they're there. But these are more alchemical Bai Shis. They're different. So meditative Bai Shis or alchemical Bai Shis involve something that's passed from the teacher to the student. So they literally awaken within the student certain energetic components, certain aspects of their mind that make them more suited to the spiritual work. So something is actually passed like a seed from the teacher to the student. So in these kind of traditions, Bai Shi is not just sought after, it's treasured. Like, it's really, very important. Like, realistically, for an art like Tai Chi, I've met people that are Bai Shi that aren't that good. I've met people that were never Bai Shi in Tai Chi, but they're exceptional. You know, it doesn't correlate. I've met people that are Bai Shi that are exceptional, people that aren't Bai Shi. Like, it's every possible thing within the martial arts, because ultimately, martial arts depends upon your own personal input that you put in. So Bai Shi serves a purpose because it shows you've been accepted by someone to teach you, but it's not the be-all and end-all, you know. Whereas in something like alchemy or meditation, once you get to the higher levels, actually the Bai Shi is more valued, because the teacher will like attune you at the point of giving you the Bai Shi and making you the disciple, if you want, so that you are more, it's like you're dragging you from a particular vibrational frequency towards their own, which is in line with the lineage, and then it's easier for you to do the work within that line. So these kind of Bai Shis don't normally involve handing over a tea or a red envelope, not from what I've seen. Sometimes they still have touching their head to the floor, and there's different ceremonial aspects. Sometimes there's an offering to a shrine, but not always. But more importantly, trying to get the words right, more importantly, the teacher will pass on, normally either through a thumb onto the forehead or the top of the head, or through emission of qi or something like this. They will pass on to you something that will transform the inside of your body. Now, I've been through a few of these. Some of them, there is a vague feeling of something happening inside. And I don't know if that's because teachers have different strengths or my perception is better. One case, I've been through Bai Shi ceremonies where they'll literally switch off your awareness. So it's like you lose time, like you lose 5 minutes. You think you've been sort of blacked out for 5 seconds. You come back and 5-10 minutes have passed, and they've been playing around with your energy field. It's almost like an alien abduction. You know, you hear these people that are driving and then they wake up in the middle of the road and they've lost several hours and they can't remember it. It's very similar with some of these Bai Shis. I'm not saying that aliens abduct you during I don't think so. Maybe that's how they work. But you kind of lose time. Like there's a whole profound shift that goes on. The first Bai Shi I received of this sort, I was quite young actually, younger than, surprised they did it. Put his thumb on my forehead, and the first thing that happened was like fireworks going off in my head, like a display of lights and explosions. I remember my head being thrown back, and it was like someone was sending electricity through my body. And then afterwards I went through a whole kind of mental collapse, for want of a better term, while my mind readjusted itself in line with the lineage. And this is an internal version of Bai Shi. So at this stage, this kind of Bai Shi, like I say, is often sought out because it's the seed for your kind of energetic awakening. It doesn't mean that awakening can't be achieved without it, of course, but it's a hell of a leg up, if you know what I mean. Now, these kind of Bai Shis, you can't really carry more than one, because the Bai Shi contains a kind of thumbprint, and sometimes you can read it. I've been to teachers who have the ability, like, to read the thumbprint of the person that Bai Shi'd you, or the tradition you're in, so they can go, all right, you're within this particular branch of this Chan lineage. I don't have that ability to sense or read that, but they can read because the thumbprint is there. So it reminds me of, like, you know, there's your thumbprint on the stamp, the red seal, you know, that they put the Chinese stamp on. And often they change yin tang, which is a point named after the spirit seal, the sealing process. And then they overwrite that seal with their own thumbprint. And what it often does is eradicate the previous lineage, meaning that your teachings are not lost, the methods are not lost, you still remember them, but your vibrational frequency, your energy state, has been moved from that lineage to the new lineage. Because you can't have both. So you can't be Bai Shi'd into, for example, a northern alchemical Taoist sect and a Chan Buddhist meditative sect, not if the Bai Shis you received in both of these traditions were real and authentic, and actually the unbroken psychic seed that have been passed down through those lines. Because as soon as I have one, it replaces the other and overwrites it. So when I see people say or writings that they have a Hindu lineage and a Buddhist lineage and a Taoist lineage, I know that actually that's not quite true. They might mean that they have studied or been accepted to a point where they learn the methods in these different traditions, but they can't actually have a working internal tradition within these particular methods, because each one would overwrite the other. Now, of course, I'm not saying that somebody who says they have all those lineages being dishonest. Definitely not. That's not what I mean. I mean, in a way, I could say that if I wanted to, because I think sometimes people might be indicating they've been accepted and as inner-door students and have the methods from different traditions. So, for example, I have been Bai Shi'd in Taoist traditions, alchemical traditions, and I've been Bai Shi'd in Chan traditions. So I could say accurately that I have lineages in both Taoism and Buddhism, but But there'd be nothing wrong with that, because it'd be indicating that I've reached a certain level of acceptance as an inner door student in those traditions. So you could say that, but it would be more accurate to say, not, it'd be complicated, but it'd be more accurate to say, I have previously been initiated into this tradition, but now I'm initiated into this tradition. That gets complicated. I'm not sure people would understand it, but maybe from what I'm explaining here in this lecture, you can understand that what I'm indicating is I used to have a lineage in this tradition, now I have a lineage in this tradition. And the last Bai Shi I went through, the first half of the Bai Shi was them eradicating the previous Bai Shi. That's what it was. There was a cleansing ceremony done first to eradicate the structure that had been put into my energy system from the previous tradition before their tradition was overlaid onto my own. And I don't think that's for ownership or anything. It's simply for the practicalities of, maybe it's only, I don't think so. if there is a energetic thing that is being passed on, I need to make that person resonate with this lineage as strongly as again, otherwise it won't work, because I don't want a fusion, an amalgamation of these two things, because even though fusions are popular these days, they don't really work. You know, the purity of a lineage is better if you wish to get it to work for you for your particular thing. So accurately I could say I have external Bai Shis. I have a few. There's been several external Bai Shis people have given me within different traditions, but because I have studied several different versions of Yang style Tai Chi, Chen style as well actually. Not many people know that, but I have a Chen style background too. I've been in these arts for a long time. And a Xingyi background and a Bagua background, and I've been initiated into not all of those, but some of them. None of those arts are pure. Like I can never claim to be a pure anything, because my body has transformed according to their arts. So if people say, what kind of style do you do? I could say, well, I teach you the systems of, I can teach you the systems of Yang style, and I can teach you the systems of Bagua. But me personally, I am not pure any of those things, because those arts I practiced to the point of them transforming my body. So what style do I do? My style is internal Chinese martial arts. That's my style, based upon the input of several versions of Yang style Tai Chi, Chen style Tai Chi, Bagua and Xingyi. It doesn't mean that I've created a fusion of the forms or a fusion of the systems, but I guess you could argue that my body is a kind of fusion of the results of all of those arts. So my external background, my external Bai Shis are representative of the fact that those teachers who taught me those arts have accepted me enough to start teaching me those systems, and this is the result. My internal lineage is only have one, despite having been through the Bai Shis 1, 2, 3, 4, despite being taken through 4 internal versions of 5. That's rude. Yeah, I forgot 5, sorry. One of them for a very short space of time. But despite being taken through 5 internal Bai Shis, I only have one, because that internal Bai Shi is not based upon the methods or the exercises. I still know the methods and the exercises for those 5 different traditions, and I don't teach them all. I only teach from one. But I know the exercises from 5 different traditions, but I only have one Bai Shi, because the internal version of the Bai Shi has overwritten all of the others to leave me with one. So I have 4 X, it's like having 4 X's, 4 X Bai Shis internally and 1 current Bai Shi, and that's basically where I sit tradition-wise. But because that's all very complicated and it takes a while to explain, you know, it wouldn't really work, would it? You go on your website and you look up your teacher's CV and he says, I've got 4X lineages. It doesn't really work, but hopefully you can see from a very literal point of view what I'm trying to explain here. Now, to some of you, this will all sound too cosmic, for sure. So the external lineages are what most people would believe in. And they're different kinds, aren't they? Because the external lineage is very much this person taught this person, taught this person. The internal lineage is based upon the idea of a seed being passed on, and then it opens up to someone to achieve a certain level of awakening, and then that seed is passed on. So it's a different thing, right? So how are lineages lost? Because they are, right? And they're both lost in different ways. The external lineage is lost when the purity of the lineage is broke. So, for example, could I ever pass on an external lineage that I've been handed? I don't think so. I don't think many teachers would admit this. This is me being brutally honest. So because I was given the lineage for, say take two versions of Yang. Say I got two lineages for two different versions of Yang. Could I ever pass those on? No. So I could never hand on a Bai Shi in Yang-style Tai Chi. I could never hand on a Bai Shi in Bagua. I just couldn't. Because I'm not purely doing that one system. So therefore, if I were to Bai Shi someone, it's already amalgamation. So I don't really see what the point of it is. So I'm a Westerner. It wouldn't really translate from me. I think it's weird if a Westerner did this anyway. But it would be weird. It would just feel odd. But if someone came to me and said, I want you to Bai Shi me in Yang-style Tai Chi, I would say, no, I can't. Because honestly, I can't teach you the method that's been passed down through, say, Tian Jiaolin's line to me, because it's already mixed with all of these Yang-style things. Because simply teaching you the form is not really teaching you the inner door. It's not inner door teachings, because inner door teachings, maybe this doesn't make sense. Look, outer door teachings are the forms and the drills. So even though lots of people think, oh, I know all the secrets because I got all the drills, I got all the forms, I know all the exercises, that's still outer door. Outer door, you can learn all the forms and the drills and the exercises. Inner door is the teacher is able to pass all of the subtle internal mechanics from themselves to you. Now, if someone were to try to Bai Shi in, say, Tianjia lineage from myself, they couldn't. Or I couldn't pass it on honestly, because there's internal mechanics from Bagua and Huang style all mixed in with my body. So the most they could get from me in martial arts is they could Bai Shi and become a disciple of my methods. But it's not Tian Jiaolin's anymore. It's not Huan Shenchan's line. It's not one of the southern factions, the Nanpei line. It's none of those things, because it's not Chung style Bagua. It's all mixed in my body. So I have an internal method I use, but they can't. It's not purely any of those lines anymore. I hope that makes sense. So I'm just being brutally honest, and this is why I would be an unsatisfactory candidate for a further Bai Shi in the martial arts from someone that wanted to preserve the purity of their lineage, because it's too many things built into my body. So they would have to eradicate all of the other mechanics in my body, get rid of them, so that I could purely pass on what they were teaching, and that would be the Bai Shi. So to counter that, I do also think that many of the teachers that came before also did similar things. So I don't think, if there's how many generations since Yang Lu Chan, I don't think anyone is doing what Yang Lu Chan did. They might all be looking for the secret source of Yang Lu Chan's original method, but every single teacher has changed it. By the time it reached Tian Jiaolin, by the time it reached, Yang Ban Ho, by the time it reached Chen Ban Qing, it had been modified by their prior experiences. So realistically, it's already modified. So maybe you could argue that's already been happening, but I would feel that the most I could ever teach is my personal interpretation of the arts. And I think that's all any martial arts teacher can do. For some people, that's not acceptable. They want the traditional, the original, but of course I think they're deluded, because the most you can ever learn is the external forms. But the other reason I would never Bai Shi someone in an external tradition is I just don't think that it carries across into Western traditions very well, Western culture. I couldn't imagine sitting in a chair while Dave, just some random name, hands me a cup of tea. I take the Chinese tea, I sip it. I wish it was something more interesting. And then they bow to me 3 times on the floor and then hand me a red envelope. And then we light incense for the ancestor. Thank you, Yang Lu Chan. And then, it's cosplay. It's such an alien concept to a non-Confucian, non-Chinese, non-Asian person that the ceremony is empty because there's an external lineage anyway. It doesn't make any sense for that to be the case. So I would never take someone through that process for a martial art. For me personally, I think it translates better into the West to have students, senior students, and then people that you make very, very clearly are highly senior within your school, and you trust them to teach the arts you taught them to the highest possible degree, and that's probably enough. There's no need for the ceremony and the ritual, and certainly no need for the name of, like, the term disciple or anything. I know that not everybody will agree with that or agree with my take on it, and you might be right. I'm not I'm not overly fixed on that view. I could be completely wrong. It's just my take on it, and maybe to some people that ceremony and that ritual does hold a place. Maybe it does hold a place. Maybe I'm trying to talk myself out of it now, aren't I? Maybe it does hold a place in modern society, but I don't think so. But then again, I'm not really a culture file. You know, I'm not. You probably, well, this is my couch. This isn't the podcast studio. You've probably seen from the podcast studio I usually film in that I'm clearly not a highly cultured guy. So therefore, the whole of Chinese culture doesn't really appeal. I love the arts, but I'm not that interested in all of the trimmings. And maybe the people more interested in preserving that Chinese culture, they would be more interested in maintaining that. But do remember that inner door teachings are not based on usually a new exercise or something. They're based upon the subtle internal skills that the teacher passes to the student. It's the other reason why you shouldn't take a Bai Shi from someone whose skills you don't respect. I don't see the point of it, unless it's for business or status, because I've heard of people that will say, well, I'm Bai Shi under this guy, but he's not very good. It's like, why did you take the Bai Shi under him then? Because the whole point of Bai Shi is you're agreeing to be their student. They're agreeing to now nurture you as a student and teach you the inner door aspects of the art. So therefore, if you don't respect their skill, the Bai Shi was pointless. And it goes back to that thing that you observe each other. 3 years visiting the master, 3 years visiting the student. That's 6 years of assessing each other to decide that this is the right person to nurture me in these particular skills. The only reason I have quite a few Bai Shis is, and remember, I'm not counting the ones that I don't really place importance on that were mostly political, I just ignore. It's because I spent years and years with each teacher. Like each teacher I've had, sometimes they crossed over and I had more than one at once, but I've spent a long time with each teacher, like a long time. I've trained since I was a kid, and I've spent ages. I went to some of them. I went to live with some of them. I at least lived near. I moved house. I literally moved my house to go and live near the teachers so that I could spend time with them and study in every single class they did. That was how I learned. So full-time training, or as close as I could get, was what I was always after, with teachers that were Bai Shi and me and taking me on as students. I wanted as much interaction as I could to learn the inner door methods. And the inner door methods, like I said, were not more exercises. It was more input with hands-on, or allowing me to feel what's going on in their body, or showing me how to manipulate the inside of my body, or whatever, to create the higher level results within those arts, or my clumsy attempts at. So, what am I talking about? Who knows? Bai Shi. And then in the internal version of the Bai Shi, like I say, you can only have one, but that is something that is different. To me, that can be passed on. But even that, you need to understand, like, the difference between the ceremonial aspects of the internal Bai Shi and the actual mechanics that pass it on. So even that, the passing on of the energetics, doesn't necessarily need all of the ritualistic aspects. Sometimes it's hard to ascertain which ritualistic parts are needed and which aren't, so maybe you're better off doing all of it. But then also you have to reach a certain level of skill before a Bai Shi can be passed on, because the external lineages die because a teacher couldn't find anyone who could purely enough do their method, so it got watered down by being mixed with all of the other methods they did. That was how external lineages got lost. So therefore, if you wanted a pure Bagua lineage, you found a teacher that only had that Bagua lineage. That was the easiest way to learn. If they had 8 Bagua lineages from, 8, it's appropriate for Bagua, 8 Bagua lineages from 8 different teachers, you probably weren't getting a pure lineage because it's all mixed in. So that was how they got lost. Internal lineages, and does it matter? Who knows? I mean, in martial arts, the most important thing is the skill anyway, right? Not what credentials you have. Then the internal lineages would get lost because the teacher that received the Bai Shi hadn't then used the seed of the Bai Shi to awaken enough that there was anything worth passing on. So say, for example, I go to an alchemy master. or whatever, a meditation master, it doesn't have to be any particular system, and they pass on the sort of mind-to-mind stamp that adjusts everything inside of me, fireworks, mind change, energetic adjustment. Okay, I receive it. Then I go away. 2 weeks later, I Bai Shi somebody else. What's the point? It won't do anything. It won't pass anything on because the master passes it to me. I then need to practice for 20 years to enable that process to unfold within me till I reach a certain degree of awakening, something that I haven't yet reached. I'm still a muppet. So till it unfolds within you, till the seed has been given time to water and grow, and only then, when you have maximized or actualized to the highest potential that you possibly can the teachings you received, then that internal version of the lineage could be passed on by you to somebody else as well. And then their role is to take that seed and water it till it flourishes to the highest possible degree, and then they can pass it on. So how the internal lineages get lost is it gets passed to a person and then they quit training, which often happens, or it gets passed to that person and then they hand it on, or try to, before they've even done anything themselves. And then of course what happens is that person you pass it on to passes it on to someone else quickly. Next thing you know, there's 5 more generations within your lifetime of it just being passed on and it never coming to fruition, because the internal Bai Shi is based upon coming out of your realization of the full process. And that's the difference between the internal and the external lineage. Now these days, external Bai Shis are starting to be rarer, especially with the proliferation of external schools of Tai Chi, not just that, Tai Chi Bhagwat yoga as well, like the widespread practice of it is losing that sort of traditional aspect. But then in internal arts, internal Bai Shis are even rarer, like they're starting to disappear big time, so they're hard to find, because to find a meditation teacher or an internal teacher that's actually reached a high degree of actualization or realization is very, very rare. And of course it means that that unbroken line of realized masters to pass it on, it's very difficult. And if you do get past an internal lineage, an internal Bai Shi, of course, now you have a big responsibility. More than just a marketing thing. I need to keep it alive through its culture. No, you need to keep it, or I need to keep it. I've got the responsibility, haven't I? I need to keep it alive by trying my damnedest to actually reach the full potential of that method within my lifetime. Otherwise, I am directly responsible for at least a part of the death of that internal Bai Shi. If I don't personally achieve mastery, which I have not yet, if I don't personally achieve a mastery, then I've been responsible for the killing of an internal lineage. Hopefully they pass it on to some other people too, and maybe they can spread it if I fail. But that's a responsibility that comes from an internal lineage. So these days, external Bai Shis mean little to me. But internal Bai Shi, or the one at a time you can hold, is very, very important. It's a sacred thing that needs preserving, And I guess the argument then, and that kind of goes back to a different podcast, a podcast I only put on the audio files. There's a couple of podcasts never made it to YouTube if you're watching this. They're only on the podcast apps. I did another one on Bai Shi about, and if you're interested in more of my take on the sort of internal or spiritual Bai Shis, you can find that podcast. I can't remember what it's called, but you'll find it, something about lineages. But it's concerning the fact that you can only ever really be first or second generation of a lineage in the internal traditions, because as soon as that seed is passed to me, and say by some fucking miracle I achieve some kind of awakening, then the seed I'm passing on is the fruition of my awakening. So I become the first generation, they become the second, then they awaken, they become the first, and then they become the second. So the whole idea of there being 26 generations of an internal or spiritual lineage doesn't really work. It's like there's 26 generations maybe of the methods, but not of the actual imprint of the realization that's passed on. So it's a complicated and intricate procedure. And especially with internal lineages as well, you need to be... There's a nice cat running around in the garden. I was trying to make friends with him, but he doesn't trust me yet. I think he can tell I'm mostly a dog person, but he'll warm to me. Yes, you need to be aware that there is a psycho-emotional imprint of the personality of the teacher onto you as well. So very much I can see many of my values automatically start to shift, whether I like it or not, to the values of the people that have passed on the internal version of the Bai Shi to me. So therefore it's very important to me that I get to know that teacher, and I would never accept a Bai Shi ceremony from a teacher that I didn't respect as a person. They have to be moral and ethical, not perfect, who is, but moral and ethical, and have a standpoint that resonates with what I believe to be right. And if there are characteristics or traits that I find deplorable within that person, then I don't want the Bai Shi. And in fact, the internal Bai Shi would be negative for me, because I would start to adopt some of their character traits. And so it's a big topic. Like, I could go on talking about Bai Shi for hours and hours and hours. Honestly, it's so huge, and there's a whole interesting aspect with the mechanics of it, and the sort of spiritual and the karmic implications of it for both the teacher and the student. It's a huge, huge topic, and it's something that's not, I guess, almost enough for a book on its own, you know, not that I could be bothered to write such a thing. It'd be writing it and reading it would be like watching paint dry. But Bai Shi is huge, and I just wanted to do this podcast episode to explain to people who are interested the implications of such a thing. So a few parting thoughts on Bai Shi. Number one, they should never be political. They're not a certificate. Once you are Bai Shi, that means you are accepted to start your training. Okay, that's what it means. The other thing with Bai Shi is that they're only useful if you then bring it to fruition and it actualizes within you. Otherwise it's pointless, because your skill or your realization is what matters most of all within all of these arts. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful, but as you know, I like to talk shit. And I was asked to do one on Bai Shi. So there we go. That's my view on Bai Shis. You might not agree, and I get it, actually. And this is one of these podcasts where, well, I'm all right if you disagree. I'm definitely okay if you disagree with this one, because I know people will have all different ideas about Bai Shi, and I'm sure within different traditions they've interpreted it differently, and I can only give you my personal experience of Bai Shi from the traditions that I've been within. So, thank you.